Today on Making It in Music, we are stepping into Calgary's jazz scene. Our guest is someone whose name keeps popping up whenever live music, community, and big ideas collide. Gerry Hebert is a performer, educator, artistic director, and currently the operations manager of JazzYYC. From studying music in Paris and Banff to touring internationally with the Swinging Bovines to shaping Calgary's into a jazz destination, Gerry has spent over 3 decades doing one thing exceptionally well, creating environments where music and musicians can thrive. This isn't just a story about playing jazz, it's about building culture, sustaining scenes, and loving the process as much as the performance. So let's make it in music with Gerry Hebert. Welcome.
Hello, good to see you, Louis.
Yes, welcome. I'm excited to hear more about your stories. Let's start with a little warm up, some questions.
Okay.
Yeah. What's a record or artist you keep returning to, especially when you need some perspective?
Perspective. It's people have asked the question like, who's your favorite in various things, and I struggle with that because I think there's so many different artists that have influenced me, and when it comes to the music I listen to, it's a pretty broad range of things from classical to jazz are kind of obviously foundations, but popular music and everything in between.
Right.
I think one of my biggest influences, besides some of my teachers, has been players like Branford Marsalis or Cannibal Adderley or John Coltrane. Just sort of those players that I got to see or hear as a young person that gave me my first understanding of the vocabulary.
Mm. Okay, all the classics. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was the very first moment you felt like live music hook you, not as a casual listener, but as a like a calling into music?
I'm not sure if there was a particular specific moment. I think I started in bands like a lot of people in junior high,
Yeah.
and was sort of, hey, here's some instruments. What do you want to play? We had to make a list and 2 or 3 choices, and I ended up selecting the saxophone, specifically the tenor saxophone, because looking at it, thought it was the coolest little thing there. And I don't know, I think that, wanting to play a musical instrument had been something growing in me, through elementary as a young person. And I grew up in a family where we had music kind of not just playing with recordings, but also being created in our family gatherings. We had an aunt who was a singer and piano player, and we would sing songs every holiday and gathering that we had. And that was something that was just part of the culture, kind of like the kitchen party, I guess,
Okay.
that I grew up with in the Francophone side of my family. So we were doing that all the time, and I didn't see performing music as anything unusual.
It is a very natural part of your
I guess,
life.
but I when I started to play a musical instrument, then I would come to that with the instrument, and I'd start trying to figure out the melodies or play along with the piano and come up with ideas and think about it like I really didn't realize at the time, but my ear was kind of getting adjusted to really listen
Right. Yeah.
to
Excellent.
those things, those melodies.
That's where it starts. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So on a non-music day, how do you reset your creative batteries?
What's a non-music day?
Does that happen?
Well, I mean, music is one of those, like, the quality of the music around you, I think, affects the way you feel.
Mm.
So
Changes your mood. Yeah.
yeah, it changes the mood for sure.
Mhm.
So non-music days, in terms of not performing, I guess, or not being as active with a project. Like, I do like projects. I like it when there's, I know I'm playing with the CPO next week. I have the music. I know I'm playing with a Ray Charles band the week after. I've got the music.
Okay.
Like, I have my stuff on the stands. That's kind of the active material that I kind of want to be ready for.
Mm.
Um, but I don't know if I have something that's called a non-music day. I think there's elements where I move between the business of music, the community, social aspect of music, as well as the performance and preparing or practicing of music. So there's all kinds of ways.
Related
Yeah, and
activities.
like I
one
said,
way or
business
another.
is doing business or emails or, meetings and all that stuff. I still try to feel like I'm, I don't know, enjoying or experiencing what that does for the music community
I see. So-
when I'm doing them. So not focused on the business of it so much as, okay, this is going to create some music opportunities. And what I'm lucky to do is work in a field where we are producing and creating opportunities for performances all year.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Excellent. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about career development and direction. You wear many hats, like a performer, teacher, professor, artistic director, executive. What role surprised you the most once you stepped into it?
Um, well, I've kind of had, I guess, 3 chapters in my
Mm.
career,
Hmm.
so to speak. And the first chapter, right out of university,
Hmm.
and it almost lines up actually with the decades, weirdly, because I graduated University of Calgary in 1990,
Yeah.
and I would say that the 80s were my primary education in music.
Right.
Like I started playing, I think it was 79. Those years go by fast.
Yes.
In terms of playing a band instrument,
Right.
and then going to university. Well, at first to college, then to university, and I sort of had a 10-year period there where I was practicing and I was, getting mentorship. And I was in a protected, school environment as a student, and
Right.
then I moved to I moved to Paris in 1990 after I graduated, and during the summers before that, I was working in the military bands,
Okay.
which was, the
Interesting.
reserve bands.
Right.
So, at the time was the HMCS Tecumseh Navy Band, which
Oh,
still exists here and
right.
happens, and so I kind of look at the different chapters as like, okay, I did that period, then I started a period of performance, and that period, 1991 to 2002 or so, I was performing with the group you mentioned, the Swinging Bovines, and my primary focus was working in a chamber music variety ensemble, in a sense that we played a variety of music. There was jazz, there was classical, there was original music, there was third stream kind of, crossover. We didn't really know our identity, honestly. We just liked a variety of music,
It was.
and we were able to play concerts, and we learned the business. I would say that was like a postgraduate, like doing the business of music.
Right. Yes. That's where you got more
Yeah, because then we
reality
booked
check.
concerts,
Yeah,
we had to
reality.
sign contracts, we had to go on tours. I got to travel all over,
Mhm.
all across Canada, around Europe, around the US. We did over 500 concerts with that.
That's excellent.
And that was just touring, performing. And we would also teach and do workshops and school, you know, maybe presentations where we were focused on educational stuff. But I was not teaching
Right.
in a school at that time. I was doing some clinics, and when I was home, I was doing some private teaching. And we were cycling, doing tours that were anywhere from, 1 week to 6 weeks, at a time.
Right.
So, like, I don't know if that's exactly answers your question, other than that it became a phase of, like, you learn the industry,
Right. As you
and,
go along
as you
with the
go.
project. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was probably, I'd look back at it now, a very formative and informative period for me as a person, because I don't really see a difference between the different things I do. Like, I'm wearing hats maybe if to other people, it's like my hat is, oh, I'm producing this show, or I'm performing in this show, or I'm selecting artists to perform in a show, or I'm, negotiating the contract. And so they're all the same hat in a sense to me, because you have to be literate in this industry,
Yeah.
and that crosses the business of it and all the different parts of it. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, the industry was shifting
Yes.
during that time,
Totally.
where agents and managers and various supports to the industry were not as accessible, I guess you could say.
Yes.
And we did work with agents, and we did have different things at times, but now it's almost like there's barely any.
Yeah. You have to do it all yourself.
You got to do it
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
And I was lucky that I was kind of getting that training through that period, because I was like, you got to do it yourself.
Right.
You're going to wait for somebody to do it for you.
It's not gonna.
That's not ideal,
Yeah.
especially as a performer. I would say you can't really wait. You might get selected to get the right supports at certain times that could help, but I don't know. It's like, it's to get a really fulfilled experience in the music industry, and then kind of balance that with what I would, what they call life-work balance,
Right.
like having a family.
Yes.
I've been lucky to be in a long-term partnership with my wife through most of that time. So
Yeah.
having a grounding at home made a big difference too.
Right. Right. And
Yeah.
touring all the time and having home to come to.
Well, yeah, having a place to come
Yeah.
home to, I wasn't feeling alone,
Yes.
like a partner that really supported me.
Right.
That made a big difference
Yes.
for sure. And I was in a group where we were all kind of similar and like, oh yeah, well, we don't know what we're doing. Let's do this together.
Right. Yeah.
Mm.
Oh,
So that was part of what I think in terms of wearing the hats.
mm.
I started to recognize, okay, and it's interesting. There are some cool stories out there of some artists who actually literally changed their names to be their manager, and I remember getting, there was somebody, I won't mention the name of it, but a person who was kind of quite prominent in the industry I was working in,
Okay.
who had an alias.
Okay.
So when they were being their manager,
Right.
they literally talked on the phone with a different name.
Okay. With the same person.
And
It's confusing.
I've seen that
Yeah.
multiple times.
Right.
And it surprised me at first,
Mm.
but now I kind of think of it like, well, the world seems to expect you to have these, different roles, and sometimes it's easier to actually inhabit them
Right.
and act a little bit. So I wouldn't say it's super common, but there was examples where you kind of had to
Surprised. Yeah.
kind of put a new filter on, say, okay, I'm being this
Right.
role right now.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Let's talk about building a musical ecosystem kind of thing. Calgary is often mentioned nationally when jazz comes up, and your name usually is close behind. What actually goes into turning a city into like a music destination or it's like jazz
Well,
YYC?
after that
Mhm.
10-year period in the 90s where I was touring and performing, near the end of that time, exactly, in fact, in 2000, I took over as artistic director of a jazz club in Calgary. And I was still traveling, and I got to know some people, but there was a club in Calgary. It was called
Big
Beatnik.
Nick,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
Beatnik Jazz and Social Club.
Yes, I've
It
heard.
was a cool venue that was in the basement of the Green Exchange building downtown,
Mm.
and good friends of mine owned and operated it, and we got to, supporting it. And ironically, it happened because of a failure or an issue
Mm.
where, a jazz festival, and
Mm.
the history in Calgary around jazz festivals is, could be interpreted different ways. It could be like a little sketchy in the sense that we haven't maintained a consistency like some cities have, where you've had one organization that's been able to develop over 30, 40 years, which is what you see in places like Victoria and
Right.
Montreal, obviously, and some of the bigger centers that
Right,
have
we've had it.
maintained stuff. Edmonton has its ups and downs,
Mm.
and Alberta is a little bit of a boom or bust place, as we know.
And then goes.
Anyway, around 2000, there was a situation where this venue wasn't compensated by the festival properly for some artists it had hired for their festival, and that was one of the early incarnations of the jazz societies in Calgary. And so I, and along with some other jazz musicians, were like, "Hey, this isn't fair. What can we do?" We did a thing called a jazzathon,
Okay.
where I actually convinced about 10 bands to play over 2 days, and we raised the money that was lost from that particular situation. And that sort of parlayed into me helping promote and program the jazz venue for 3-4 nights a week, and that lasted for 12 years.
Wow.
So I ended up
Long gig.
I ended up working with the owners and kind of cultivating that jazz, jazz club in a classic sense. It
Right.
really was like a New York style,
Okay.
basement club. And we, for 10 years there, I was doing that. So when you talk about the scene, that got me familiar with a lot of touring groups. So groups that were coming through Calgary, because Calgary is a major center in Canada. I mean, it is not an easy country to be a touring jazz musician.
Yes, of
And
course.
for one really simple reason, the distances between cities and the costs of travel are really high. It's not like Europe. It's not like the US even, especially on the east side. So we had some great artists that were like coming through, and I'm like, wow, where are they going to play? And we would put together these deals for them to come play at the Beatnik. And I got to meet them, and I got to build a relationship with a lot of artists season by season when they were coming from like Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Edmonton, all across the prairies, and at the same time, I noticed we were doing jam sessions, and we were doing kind of other things to cultivate the local community. I noticed players coming from, Mount Royal's jazz program and U of C's music program, and McEwen, and so the high schools have done a really good job in Calgary, I would say, of exposing a lot of young people to music and band in both jazz and concert band styles, which get them going, hey, should we do? And also, interestingly, Calgary cultivated the largest sort of amateur music program almost in North America with the West Winds. And I actually was one of the early instructors with West Winds when they were doing community band stuff.
Right.
And we have a lot of community bands
Yeah.
and also a lot of community big bands. So we started to tap into that at Beatnik. We also started a youth program at a point where we had young people, many of whom turned into really high quality performing artists that are living around the world, and going to study at schools. So that chapter 2 sort of my professional life at Beatnik kind of set me up to learn about the community and the scene. And that was a pretty critical period for, I guess, a lot of players having a home, because it was like after the gigs, Beatnik is where you went. You played a gig at the Palace, or you were at the convention center, or you were somewhere at Stampede Grounds, or you were like the downtown center of events. What was cool about Beatnik, it was in a great location where people would show up after the gigs and hang out and have a drink and chat, and it's,
Build
my gig
relationship.
was terrible, or my gig was this, and that social
Yeah.
connection
So-
was really powerful.
Yeah.
And that's something that is sort of part of the foundation of what in my values and what I'm trying to help cultivate in this community.
Right. Yeah. Sounds like an interesting time. And yeah, so from beatnik to JazzYYC, what have you learned about sustaining that for a long period of time? You did it for over 10 years.
Well,
Beyond
it's
beyond the
about good relationships,
relationships.
like having a dedicated, ownership like we had at Beatnik. The owners were a couple, Rob and Connie Young, originally came from Manitoba, from Winnipeg, and they came out here and they were in F&B, food and beverage service industry, before, and then also in interior design. They became good friends, and so you kind of I like to enjoy the people I work with,
Of course.
which it's not always that you get to choose that, but when there's moments where you're like, okay, this is a good fit. There's people here that are really, nice people, hardworking. They have a vision. They want to support this artistic scene.
Yeah.
And so I've been attracted to that and building those relationships. So I think that was kind of looking again, retrospectively, looking back at that chapter, I got to build a lot of relationships with people, with the musicians, with the people who came to the shows, volunteers, the society. Like I mentioned earlier, there's been some changes, and during that time frame, actually, there were 2 different jazz societies that collapsed in the 90s in
Oh,
Calgary.
okay.
So
Unfortunately.
that was unfortunate.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the second one was a little bit more into the 2000s. Sorry, the first one was in the late 90s. The second one was in the mid 2000s, and then another one was at the end of 2010. So in that time, I watched in my professional career, and both as a performer and as a partner for events, I kind of saw the struggles.
Yes.
And there was maybe systemic and some different challenges in Calgary. Like we have some unique things, like the Stampede. Obviously,
Right.
it is not just the elephant in the room. It is the elephants pounding around all year round in different ways in terms of its influence and the activation of community events, and how we have venues and production support and all those things. And so it took me quite a while to understand more about what's going on in this musical ecosystem. Some people don't know that actually, in terms of the gross revenue as well as the amount of activity, the Calgary Stampede is also one of the largest music festivals in Canada.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like in terms of the music that's presented.
Right. I know there's so many concerts.
There's
come
so
out
many
of
big
Stampede.
concerts in like
Yes.
Style Dome or Nashville North,
Yeah.
and all their other stages.
Right.
And they also have a big, huge youth program, right?
Yes.
And for better or for worse, both my kids were involved with the youth of the Stampede. One of them was in the Youth Young Canadians
Okay.
performing on the Grandstand show.
Right.
The other one was in the Stampede show band,
Yes.
marching band side.
Yeah.
And
I was part of the marching
yeah,
show band.
so that's a really also unique programming
It
in
is.
Canada.
Yeah.
They do some pretty wonderful things in travel.
Yes.
And so I think, again, like I kind of recognize where there was different organizations that were successful, and Jazz Society in Calgary, through the 90s and early 2000s, I think was fighting against Stampede, the timing, the festivals were growing, the costs were changing.
Right.
I think that, it's very vulnerable to instability. And again, I meant, boom and bust province that we live in.
Right.
Things can go really well, and then, people make different buying decisions, and you can have 1 or 2 poor seasons because people are like, oh no, I'm not going to concerts this year, or like I've kind of grown up as that as a norm in this province. It is not the norm in other parts of the world or in other parts of Canada even.
Right. Interesting.
So you kind of have to get used to that. And I'm born and raised Albertan.
Right.
I mean, you don't choose these things.
Yes.
I love the opportunity and the sort of the resourcefulness and entrepreneurial attitude that we have in this province,
Right.
which can benefit us as artists,
Yes.
but it also makes it very unstable at
Right.
times.
Unstable. Right. Okay. Interesting. You've said that great music happens when people are creatively engaged. How do you balance artistic risk with practical realities like funding and audiences and operations?
Well, in 2026,
Yeah.
it's kind of like still getting used to that. This is a constantly changing thing.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that recognizing the environment we're in here in Southern Alberta and Calgary specifically, we have to have really good partnership with sponsors, with donors, with our audience, with our volunteers, with the music performing community, and with the public funders. You really can't depend on one.
Right.
There used
Grants or whatever, you gotta
So it
try
used to be like we depend much more on ticket sales
tickets.
as a society than many other types of organizations do, especially outside of Alberta, where there used to be what they called the 1/3 kind of formula, 1/3 public funding, 1/3 private corporate funding, 1/3 ticket, funding would be the revenue streams for a lot of those organizations. I would say we're kind of like 25%, public funding maybe, depending on the program, maybe 15 to 20% sponsorship and donors. And then tickets are a massive part, and it can swing,
Right.
so each event. So we've learned with JazzYYC, which is, like I said, it's the 4th attempt at building a sustainable jazz society in my career in Calgary.
Wow.
There were 3 previous,
Right.
and nobody was trying to do a bad job. Like
Right. Yeah.
a lot of people can kind of be villainized a bit about they made this decision and made mistakes, and I don't think anybody goes into the performing arts to fail.
Right. Exactly.
It can happen because governance and resources and personalities and certain things. I've learned the fragility of it all. You have to be really careful on the relationships. You have to pay attention to the trends that are happening, and audiences have shifted a lot in their choices. And post-pandemic has been a massive change. But there was changes happening prior to the pandemic that we were watching anyway. And we were still, I guess you could say it's like you're doing a research project. You're kind of going and you're experimenting all the time. In fact, experimentation is, I think, a key part of taking risk. Like you mentioned, like how much is the balance? That is changing on the artist, on the event, on the venue, on the time of year, on the part of the program every time. And I'm lucky to work with some really creative and interesting and experienced people in our organization that have some great thoughts on that to help us make the best decisions we can to grow the organization and sustain the organization. But sustainability was a key feature in JazzYYC's creation because of the lack of sustainability of the previous organizations. So the scene here, both from the performers, from the audience, and from the venues, was like, hey, can you get your act together and do this professionally and keep it going first and foremost? So those are part of the DNA of the organization, is that we do have to maintain that sustainability.
Right. So many moving parts to get.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think I had a sense of this. I don't like just talking about what's happening. I have to be trying to be involved in some form.
Yeah.
Because everybody can have an opinion that you shouldn't do this, or you shouldn't hire that artist, or you shouldn't play in that venue, or you shouldn't do this kind of thing. And until you're doing it and you're sort of asking the questions, what are the artists that are available? What are the venues that fit? What is the cost that the audience can bear? You know, it is a lot. It is not a fixed formula.
Right.
I think it may have been more predictable, and I think it is more predictable in other communities, honestly. Although that's changed too. Like, here's the advantage that we have is that we've been in this unstable kind of evolving arts community in Calgary for a long time. Other places are kind of just facing it now. We've kind of always had that kind of reality. I mean, I don't like to say it in a negative way, but part of me has always felt that we're in a hostile arts community living in Alberta in terms of how we're valued, in terms of the supports, and in
Changes.
terms of the priorities.
Changes with politically every government. I was gonna say the support that comes with different kinds of.
So if you already know it's hostile,
Mm.
then you kind of approach it differently.
Mm.
You're not like waiting for people to make it easier for you. And I have good friends that I've met through the scene that say live in Quebec, and a very different experience in terms of supports, value of the arts in their culture, the opportunities and the history and the supports. It's like nothing like Alberta,
Whole
right?
different worlds.
But it's still
Yeah.
part of Canada,
Yes.
and we get those musicians playing here, and we get sometimes to play there. It's different. The different realities you have to look at. And, I don't know, running the business of music is an area I think many artists are reluctant to really delve into at times. And I know that it's not something that a lot of people are like, well, nobody taught me how to be a teacher or taught me how to run the business of teaching or performing. Well, if they had taught you, they may have taught you an archaic model that doesn't even work anyway. The reality is it's changing constantly, and you have to kind of pay attention to it in the scene here. But having some business sense and learning to negotiate and separate that from the artistic component, that's something you have to kind of learn, I think.
Okay. Yeah, which leads to my next question. What do young musicians misunderstand most about how music ecosystem really work?
So I'm lucky that I've been able to stay on an educational sort of part of my life almost all the time, whether it was private teaching, it was joining master classes, it was doing clinics at schools, workshops and camps and stuff like that. And currently I'm the sort of co-director with the University of Calgary for the University of Calgary Jazz Orchestra. And I've been doing that for the last few years, and getting a sense of what young people are facing in post-secondary, like that's pretty specific and unique place comparatively to necessarily all the ways you'll find your way into the music industry. That's only one way. Like getting a degree in music, what does that give you? I have a degree in music. It was in music education, secondary major. I was also kind of adamant when I was studying music to have the highest standard of performance I could. So I actually completed the same requirements as a performance degree as I did as a music educator. So I did recitals and I did competitions and I did extra performances and solos.
You kept it up, yeah.
I really tried to intentionally, even though they wanted me to know you're either performance stream or education stream, I picked education while trying to maintain a performance standard.
Yeah.
That was a personal choice.
Right.
And I feel that, what young people struggle with now is what is the economic reality of that after they're done.
Right.
And that's never really changed. I think that there was a simpler path of, okay, you can be an educator, you can get a job in a school, and that thing, if you can't do, you teach. I don't ascribe to that. I've found there's some really great teachers who also are good musicians, and the reality is the time is hard to juggle, like to maintain yourself as a performer. And I was also kind of in what I might call my third professional chapter of my life, taught in one specific school for 12 years. And that was a unique artist in residence opportunity where I was functioning a bit like a band director or music educator for both elementary, junior high, and high school. And I was day to day at the school, like a full-time job. And during that time, it was, I would always talk to people about having music as part of your life, like that it enhances your experience, and that building musical skills builds you, personal, social, sort of, physical skills, like motor skills, and that was really like music offers so much. It's a great barometer for, I think, your social and your personal development as a young person, having music in there. So
Even if you end up with other careers, it doesn't matter. But
yeah,
have
no, and in
music
fact,
go- yeah,
I'm not gonna
90%.
encourage people to be
Yeah.
a professional performer. Like the professional performing world, and in the most purest sense, is a very hard
Okay.
and challenging environment that you got to be very driven to do.
Yes.
I loved performing, and I liked it for that period of time I had. When I was having a family, I mean, my first son was born in '97. I was touring a lot. Um, I had to make different choices.
Of course.
And I mentioned how difficult it is to tour in Canada.
Mhm.
Well, the reality is, to make a decent enough living, you had to tour. And some people would go to cruise ships. Some people would do some big shows for a while. I was lucky to have some mentors and teachers in university that really gave me a broad, range of experience around jazz, classical, improvisation, multiple instruments. I was a woodwind player. I was studying both clarinet, saxophone, flute, and a little bit of piano and bass, and learning the rhythmic instruments. And so that gave me a foundation to say, okay, I can try to do any kind of music.
Yeah, be flexible and do.
And you need to be flexible.
Yeah, and in any situation, any band.
So when I talk about young people today,
Mhm.
I talk to them about where are you kind of interested in learning in terms of the type of music, and then I really want them to start exploring performing as early as possible. So with the youth lab band, we try to create these scenarios for them to be in front of people and to kind of get that little jolt of energy that nervousness is, to me, just focus, intense focus that you can cultivate, realizing that, yeah, maybe it's uncomfortable. The more prepared you are, the better you'll feel. But having the lights on and being in the flow
Right.
and work, especially when you're playing with other musicians
Right.
and unexpected things happen,
Right.
how do you learn to adapt?
Live reaction from audience.
Exactly.
Sure.
There's interactions going on all the time. You can't really, like, I think one of the teacher mentors I had said, well, it's always those first 500 concerts that are the hardest. After that, it gets way easier. And I was like, 500? What? It's true. It takes years, and then suddenly nothing makes you nervous exactly. You just sort of go, oh. Now, and personalities matter. Like, some people's personalities just react a bit different. And I'm not a fan of the use of a word like talent.
Mhm.
Some people, because of their personality and their opportunity, develop quick. And when they develop quickly, that's a good thing, at the same time as it's like, they're it's they can there's a double edge to that.
Of course.
And so developing at a pace where you can feel conscious, and I don't know, like, so I talk to the young people these days a lot about listening, about being in groups and working together, creating some opportunities where they understand the business, negotiating their pay, trying to set up valuation, but at the same time recognizing, okay, if I'm doing something for less money, it's not about exposure, it's about our experience for them, right? There's uh, a lot of the world, and again, back to Alberta being somewhat of a hostile arts community, is a lot of people don't value it enough, but they do. They do enjoy it, right? In fact, Albertans, in terms of a percentage of our disposable income, spend the most per capita in Canada, apparently. Now, that can be like the big shows,
Right.
Taylor Swift or whatever, those big productions that are expensive. But it's also other things in terms of home, in terms of their home choices, whether that's entertainment around, streaming or Netflix and that world, or other things. So I think you just have to kind of talk to young people and say, what's inspired you? What types of things will get you to work on your own? Because you got to do that to develop your skills, and start to pay attention to the scene. Because I think being in the university world, it's nice and sheltered and it's good, but it doesn't, prepare you necessarily to how you're going to work in a professional world where you have to be accountable to the business of the industry. And I try to help them know that they can work their way slowly into that, and they should.
Exactly. So that was my next question. What administrative or business skills do you think you wish every music graduate knows or understands?
Well, I don't think it's a music specific thing. I think it's a personal thing. I
Personal
think
thing.
people, whether they're in university for music or anything, have to build
Understand
personal accounting,
finances.
and understanding their choices, whether that's mortgages and loans and
Yes.
car
Taxes.
taxes, Like, I hate being a tax collector. I can also tell you that coincidentally or not, I think it was around 1990 that
Mhm.
then Prime Minister Brian Mulroney introduced a thing called GST. And it had this portal of like, if you make more than X dollars, then, and that number has also never changed in the whatever 35 years since. Um, I am a tax collector.
Yeah.
I have to charge GST at events. I have to explain and I have to be accountable to how much I'm paying in GST. And I was reluctant at first for a long time, and a lot of people are. I'm also a long-term member of the Calgary Musicians Association, and the advantage of being part of a collective is that people have already experienced these things, and you can ask them.
Mhm.
You don't have to know. And
Right.
now YouTube can teach a lot,
Yeah.
so that's great. But like in terms of what music students need to learn, they have to learn the personal financial responsibilities and scheduling and how to communicate.
Communicate. Yeah.
Like, and I think those things are things the music industry will teach you, but you know, you have to do it kind of gradually, which is a mentorship opportunity.
Exactly.
Like, I think the mentorship
Mhm.
of the university can be variable now, and it can be your private teacher, it can be your whatever, it could be your theory teacher or whatever history class you're taking. You might get some mentorship from that. But I get back to putting yourself in performing experiences.
Mhm.
The people that are doing that will give you a lot more mentorship, and you get the experience
Right.
in safe ways,
Safe ways.
hopefully. Um, but life skills, universities are doing maybe less of that than they could. High schools have changed.
Mhm.
I find that there's better preparation for some of the students coming out of high school, that they've done a little bit more around life skills and
Mhm.
how to, I don't know that they always, sometimes it's focused around certain social things, which can be contentious these days,
Mm.
I guess, in Alberta, especially. Like, if you teach people about the world, then they might change, which I think artists are part of a reflection of the world. So I don't know. I think there's multiple ways, and the family's
Mm.
pretty critical in that, right? What is the family influence? Because you can't veto over that. There'll be that rebellious period where young people are maybe not accepting all the things their family says to do. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be artists at all, honestly. Like,
Mhm.
at some point, you probably had an adversity there. And if you get past that adversity, or you start to negotiate through that, or or better yet, you have support from your family saying, yeah, sure, you want to explore this artistic thing, then do it for real.
Mhm.
Hopefully they're mentoring those personal, financial, and communication and scheduling things that you will need to have. And
Yes.
the artist's life is hard to schedule.
Yes. You have to be very
That's the
time
probably the
management.
challenging thing,
Time manage your own
is
practice.
the timing of things in your day.
Your own practice, your performance, and your active period and your non-active period, and
Yeah, like
discipline
I
with
said,
it.
I like goals.
Yeah.
So when I know that I'm playing with the symphony in
Mm.
2 weeks, then I'm like, okay, I pick up the music, I put it on my music stand, and each day I look at or get oriented to make sure that I feel really comfortable when I get to the first rehearsal.
Mhm.
And same thing with concerts that I have coming up. I like that. When I don't have events coming up, and I can say during the pandemic and during that 26 months of no professional work that I went through and most artists went through,
Yeah.
um, that was an existential crisis for them.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's informative too, because now young people who went through that, I don't have a good answer to what's going to happen, because I think we're dealing with the effects of it now.
Yes.
It's going to be a long generational.
Mhm.
It's it's not going to be, I think I had one of my sons graduate in 2020.
Okay.
Literally, 3 months before his grad was when all this started.
Mhm.
So that seeing his pathway and what's happened for him is completely different than for other kids.
Right.
And I think that we as a society are struggling
Mhm.
through the effects of that, and that cohort or that generation of young people are going to operate completely different. Whether it's good or bad is not for anybody but sociologists and historians will assess some things, but I think there's a lot of compensations and adjustments happening in the world. So that the good side of all of this is an introspection where people have to kind of look at themselves and say, what am I going to do? What am I good at? What do I like doing? Where is there opportunity to work? That's not just a music industry thing. That's an everything thing for young people. And as
Mhm.
we're seeing with, You can get into AI, you can get into what's happening
Right,
with
the
jobs.
TikTok and the
Like, hey, if you ask
the
me, in some
YouTuber.
ways, the arts industry is about the most stable thing there is in the way it functions
Right.
compared to many other job paths that people have these days.
This is the creative part. You have to learn to be creative in a
Well,
certain situation and
and being creative is a human experience. I think
yeah.
we have to have elements of creativity.
Mhm.
Period. All of us, whatever our vocation is.
Mhm. And traditional jobs may not be the only answer these days, and there may be
It
other.
isn't.
Yeah,
We know that.
yeah.
And there's consequences to a so-called traditional job,
Mhm.
and people might like being whatever the
Mhm.
doctor, lawyer, kind of what is
Mhm.
perceived as the, I don't want to say easier pathway, because it's not easier.
Mhm.
Um, having a good quality of life experience
Mm.
is something everybody is looking for. Purpose.
Right.
Like,
Mm.
what is the purpose?
And something that excites you, that makes you want to wake up and do it every
I
day.
think I think
Yeah.
artist life forces you to look at purpose.
Yeah.
I think some jobs and some pathways maybe do it more over time in a different way, and then you'll find maybe your purpose is the thing you're doing outside your job,
Mm.
or like I know some people who really like keeping music as their hobby,
Yes.
and that way they aren't attached to the financial issues around it,
Right.
and that's a good thing too.
There's
Like,
nothing wrong with that.
no,
Mhm.
and there's some really high quality musicians I know that are community players
Right.
that have their job and then they play music.
Mhm.
And some people that play music and then have it's just a what is the tipping point, I guess,
Yes, that's a thing.
in those things.
And the responsibility, supporting a family, all of that's to come
Yeah.
up into.
Well, I mentioned that I've been kind of lucky that I, have a partner in life that have been together a long time,
Mhm.
and we've both been able to kind of explore professionally and sort of our interests in a way where the other person helps when needed, I guess you could say. And I think it's really hard to be alone through
Yes.
things.
Right.
So that's kind of a human need thing too, right? You go back to our social behavior as
Mhm.
people and the tribe, I guess, that or your part. Like now social media, of course, is
Mm.
trying to push you into your little boxes and
Mhm.
algorithms are trying to, get you excited about stuff. And I think you have to become more savvy about what you consume.
Mhm. Yes.
And so artists, I think, become what I like about being an artist and having a creative mindset
Mhm.
is that you don't make any assumptions. You kind of go, what is it? What is, what's happening here? What are we excited about? And that could be composition or playing a piece or doing some things, or it could be all kinds of artistic outlets.
Mhm.
So I think an artistic outlet is pretty critical to human purpose.
Interesting, yeah, perspective. Yes. Okay. So yeah, that comes with the whole sustainability and building the whole ecosystem, all of that. Yeah.
Well, paying attention to it for
Yeah.
sure.
Paying attention to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So in your experience, how much of a career is about timing and how much is it about preparation? What it goes hand in hand. It's just,
Well, I mean, you can't choose when you're born or when you're what era things are in,
yeah. Mm.
Like, I did a lot of recordings in the '90s and early 2000s. I had a lot of I was on quite a few CDs and
Mhm.
projects, and what does that mean in 2026? I don't know. It's shifted, right?
Yes.
Streaming services and the way people consume music has changed a lot. So the timing
Yeah.
is what it is. It's like paying attention to the environment, and I said it's changing a lot,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
As far as I mean, success is kind of a moving target
Mm.
because the more you think you're doing well at this one thing, the more you have a higher aspiration to
Mm.
keep going, and you'll always find more, I don't want to say more successful, but you'll find people that will appear
Mhm.
to have be further down.
Right.
Their technical skills or artistic skills are
Mhm.
more advanced, or they're inspiring. I've always had this attitude that when I see something that's really amazing,
Mhm.
that is empowering, that people can be that way,
Right.
not that that person can only be that
Mhm.
way. Their pathway took them there, and you'll see some really like, wow. Like, obviously, the masters in music, whatever the style of music it is, when you see some people that really flow at that highest level, what I find so inspiring, and you look for that, that to me just gives me more evidence my conscious that, wow, when you put your time in, and this is maybe the hardest part to teach these days, is how much time you need to put in to develop your skills
Right.
in music,
Hone your skills, yeah.
and how to be efficient at that time.
And be
I think that just doing it, practicing, oh, I just practiced 2 hours. Okay, how was that practice? What was the quality of that practice? Was that building on what you did the previous practice? Were you just playing the instrument, or were you actually reinforcing some new things? Were you going slow enough that you could really consciously pay attention to things when you're practicing? Like, so I would get back to the mentors piece and the period when you're developing. We get a foundational skill set, and then we have to have an adapted skill set for the professional world. Like, get prepared for
right.
being professional. And then there's another side, which is, are you artistically creating something really fulfilling? That's,
Right.
that's another level, right?
Right.
And I used to actually, when I was teaching, I would kind of tier these things as like, there was a period where I was an instrumentalist,
Mhm.
and I was just really focused on the instrument. And there was a period where I was a musician, where it wasn't about the tool, it was about my ability to play the music. And then there was a period where I felt more like an artist,
Right.
and that was less about the music and more about the impact and the interaction in the culture and with the people, and creating an emotional experience for the listener, like that. There's a bit of
Layers.
layers,
Yes.
and we can get stuck being musicians
Yes.
for a long time.
Right. Yeah, that's why I try to teach my students the different the learning phase, and then the perfecting all the technical stuff, and then training them to be on stage, and that's the
Yeah,
whole emotional. Forget about the books and the little thing, but
right.
how to perform and how to engage with the audience, or how to build that. So the different stages.
And one doesn't necessarily completely prepare you for the next.
Right.
Like, it will give you some guides,
Right.
but again, get back to the experience part. You have to kind of put yourself out there,
Right.
and you have to be willing to take criticism, or to be, not loved by everybody,
Right.
right?
Even fail
And
on
that's,
stage and have a blank.
yeah,
How do you deal with that?
subjective, objective things are what they are, right?
So
So,
deal with your own emotions. Like,
well, and emotions are, I had one teacher who talked about
Yeah.
emotions are like weather.
Yeah.
They come through, and you kind of get through it, put a coat on. It's really windy, it's really uncomfortable, but it's going to change, and it will. And sometimes you become better able to see it coming.
Right.
Like, it's forecasting.
Okay, so say right, and learn how to deal with it, right, and prepared.
My other hobby,
Yeah.
one thing that I love to do, which I would, you mentioned what would be kind of fulfilling, or I go sailing in the
Oh,
summers. I have a sailboat.
Oh, okay.
I learned about sailing.
All right.
It's kind of a quirky thing people know about me if they're friends, and
Uh-huh.
it's like, oh, he's got a boat, and he's Sailor Jerry, and he does his little, and being out in the ocean,
Yeah.
like big ocean,
Yeah.
in a sailboat, and experiencing. I actually find it a very similar experience to being a musician or being a performer,
Okay.
because it engages your sensory experience on all levels, intellectually as well. Like, you have to plan and think, and be ready for anything, at the same time as you got to kind of watch what's happening and feel it.
Predict.
And so there's elements of that experience which I really love, that help me as a performing artist.
Interesting. Oh,
And also, it's a nice separation,
separation.
right? Like,
Doing
okay,
something else.
so after festival in June,
Yeah.
I go to my boat,
Mm.
and I spend at least a month on it.
Right. That's your Zen time.
That is
It's your Zen time.
and I'm very grateful.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not on a big yacht or anything. I'm on a little sailboat that, is old. It's like from the 70s, but it's not a cheap hobby. But compared to, like, say, going on holidays to Mexico, or
Yeah.
having a timeshare, or doing some kind of little summer, camping, cottaging thing, it's like that, just on water.
Of course.
But it is completely sensory engaging. So when you're doing it, you're like, well, we're here. We're in this bad weather, good weather, whatever it is.
And how to react to it.
How do you deal with it?
Yeah.
Exactly. And then when I come back, it does change the pace of my energy. I feel like I'm a little better at not letting everything, the mania of all the information that we see nowadays, catch up with us.
Interesting hobby.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sorry if that wasn't on your list of questions.
No.
What do you do for hobby?
No, that's great. Yeah. Good to know more about you. Your other side, other
Yeah.
Gerry. Yeah. Okay. So You spend decades teaching and mentoring. What separates, what do you notice? What separates students who burn out from those who stay curious and resilient?
I've been able to watch some interesting journeys of some young people who are quote unquote successful as a
Mhm.
performing artist or as in the music industry in some form. Um, I find they like me went through different phases.
Mhm.
So if I went through these sort of 10-year periods or kind of almost on the decade, I was doing slightly different professional focus.
Mhm.
I'm now a few years into my newest one. And now I've been able to look at some of the students and say, okay, I mean, whether I see particular trends is that you see certain personalities, maybe. They have to be pretty driven and inspired. And they need to be social people.
Mhm.
I think what used to be acceptable was you were very good as a musician, but you could kind of not necessarily always be a very nice person. Like, not that that's it's not that they weren't nice people, it's just that maybe they had some different ways to deal with the situation of the business of music, right?
Right. They have to
Protect
focus on the
themselves.
art, and then they have somebody else
Yeah,
deal
like
with the business side.
and
Or
maybe they had some personalities up, like I mentioned people who actually had a manager personality.
yeah, exactly.
I think we have to kind of shift a little bit. So I do find that with the students I know that can be comfortable in multiple roles
Mhm.
seem to be more able to kind of sustain themselves. If you're very focused on one way of being, then maybe you should find that teaching job or find that band that you can play with, but you're going to sacrifice other things. If you want to be a touring musician or you end up on cruise ships for 10 years or you end up like what people will call successful. And, there's that question that constantly gets asked. Like if somebody I don't know finds out I'm a musician, say, is that your day job?
Yes.
Like that always like, well,
Surprise them.
it's
Or
sometimes it's been my day job, sometimes it's part of my day, and sometimes I have to do different things on projects or with a business adventure, which may be musical or may not be musical. Mostly mine are musical. I've seen some people be very successful investing and doing like a little bit of a side gig in some, you know, maybe it's a project or something that also interests them in business or in a vocation, like maybe they do some like a lot of people now are doing like web design or they're doing like marketing or they're doing
social media.
yeah,
That's a
social media stuff. So there's some people that have built a little bit of a side hustle on something and they're also performing artists. I think you have to find that balance that fulfills you and gets you out of bed in the mornings. Um, and keeps you engaged. But what I don't see as successful is the pure artist in the way that you can kind of not develop maturity is not the right word, but kind of your social skills.
Mm.
Like, I think we have to have social skills now.
Yeah.
I think not just because, well, you
You
can
have
be
to
canceled or you can be, well, all the, your words can haunt you a little bit. Like people now, everything is kind of monitored on some levels if you're in the consumer world. So being on this podcast or being in situations where I'm interviewed or I'm on radio, I'm trying to be conscious of the cultivation of the community to be a safe space for you to make some mistakes. And so with those young people in our youth lab program, I love to hear what they're doing and what they think about stuff. And then to maybe gently say, well, have you thought about this as well? Or have and the mentorship piece is maybe what's missing the most. We're getting mentored by a lot of YouTubers
Yes.
and various, hey, you should eat this food.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, what happened to people who are studying this? And,
Right.
I know what I'm not an expert in,
Right.
and I know what I have built a lot of experience in. So whether that's called expertise or not, when somebody asks me about something about the music industry or business or performing or practice, I think I can tell them what I've experienced
Right.
and that and get multiple views. So
Mhm.
I think a person who is open to multiple views, who is who gets along well with people, who puts himself out there.
Mhm.
They see them at the jams, I see them at the concerts. I see that like those people I start to see they start to develop things. People who are only practicing and only performing under their certain experiences, you can't control it the same way. That's going to be a hard way to kind of build a career. If you're really, really good, again, it's like professional hockey players or something. What is the percentage
Right.
of the university students that study music that actually make a pure living as a performer?
Mhm.
I don't,
It's very little. Yeah.
well, I remember doing a workshop with the Musicians Association where we talked about all the different ways that you can work
Mm.
with that experience. So you have to find one
Yeah.
or a combination of them.
Combination. That's right. That's a reality these days. Yeah.
Yeah.
Be open to it. Okay. So yeah, you've mentioned musicians across classrooms, clubs, organizations. What do emerging artists in Calgary most often ask help with, versus what they actually need, or young people ask? What do
I think
they
it's
ask help?
most of the time in the field of the music I'm kind of working with, it's about development of their playing initially,
Mm,
like how to get more comfortable soloing or what is the, different ways to transcribe or build their vocabulary as artists
mhm.
and experience, and because you have to have a skill set in jazz
Yes.
especially, that if you're improvising has to be compelling enough, and for people, not just like, we don't play for the other jazz musicians. If you did, you'll always be frustrated. It's like playing for whatever your peers.
Mhm.
They're only one part of that. So I mean, I think that building their skills where they feel like they're progressing as an artist at the same time as learning the community. Like that's where I say you get in a band, get in fights about what you should do in your band, what clothes you're gonna wear,
Parts.
what you're gonna do at the concert,
Yeah.
and promote the concert. And nobody came, and blah blah. Figuring out the business of the, like, that's part of what you should be doing at the same time as practicing, and at the same time as putting yourself in situations to challenge yourself.
Right. Go
Um,
join a festival or sign up for whatever
yeah, like,
opportunities to play.
I think that there isn't a singular way to do it anymore. Not
Mhm.
that there really was in the past. I
Mhm.
think there was institutionalized pathways. People said you're studying your major, whatever that
Mhm.
might be. Um, I think that, like, I'm probably not the most, I guess, aggressive in this regard, because living in a city and having a standard of living should be also a right, like being paid something,
Mhm.
like being an arts worker.
Yes.
Um, that's why I like the Musicians Association. A lot of people complain that, oh, they're charging dues and they're just causing, challenges in the scene. Well, if you engage in the conversations, you can better prepare your negotiations, and we negotiate all the time.
Mm. Mm.
And maybe that's the piece that I talk to students a lot,
Mhm.
is learning how to listen and learning how to talk in a productive way,
Mhm.
and being okay to sort of, okay, well, this last time I did this, this happened. Maybe this time I'll approach it a little differently. So being adaptable. I think if you look in the history, the successful artists, whether they were, Mozart needed patrons to survive. He was put out there as a child performer by his dad and with his sister to do, because that was that's kind of the equivalent of going on, tour now,
Yeah.
like what was happening to both build skills and to make an income.
Right. Income.
And there's going to be the industries around which seem like they're just leeching off what you're doing and they're not really supporting it, but you have to decide how much of that industry you want
Mhm.
around you, and at the higher levels, you need more help.
Yeah. You
You
have to
gotta
pay
find
their
trusted people
trust in people, pay the dues, and
and build good relationships
good
with those
relationship.
people, and occasionally, you don't know who to answer to because of generational and various, like, people seem like experts. I really I like to talk to the young people with the lab band program and also people I meet in schools or clinics, and just sort of say, learn how to have a good conversation with people,
Mhm.
like to listen to them and also build relationship,
Right.
because that's all you're really doing. At the end of the day, you're either getting closer to somebody or further. That's like in your personal relationships too, right? So I think it's tricky because you have to build a lot of relationships in the arts.
Yes.
You got to get to know people.
Right.
You got to remember their names. You got to sort of remember what you say.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in things like the four agreements. Be impeccable with your word. Don't say something you don't really mean or that you really don't understand. So how do you do that? First of all, you don't say anything. You listen more. Eventually, you'll have an opinion, and then you'll be like, "But what about this?" You'll start to ask better questions. Listening is really a pretty amazing, important skill for musicians, but people. And I am always trying to remind myself of that too, to listen.
Excellent. Yeah. Do you see the role of being a mentor change like today than when you were up and coming? Where do you think musicians still need to take ownership themselves? You talk about a lot about already, just listening better and communication skills, but being a mentor.
I think being a mentor, what's hard now is being present for people. When you're the teacher, you're present every week. When you're the parent or whatever, you're present a lot. I think caregivers and various other people through your development are mentors. Your friends become mentors in the sense of where they are on the scale of their experience. Is it more important now or different? It's probably different, but at the same time, the key mentors, whether they're your family and or your educators and your social connection, those things are still relatively the same in every generation. Now that we can consume, we can be back to the social media algorithms and the information. So if you look for something you're interested in, you go to a concert, you're like, wow, that artist is amazing. Then you look at their content. Like that seems to be a thing that happens now. So the downside is that you're getting a very selected,
Yeah.
Not realistic view of who they are. They are creating an identity. Most of the successful ones pretty clearly to do what they need. Popular art aside, because I don't work in that field. I mean, that's the same as selling Coca-Cola in some ways, in terms of marketing and branding. Pop music is a, the artist is almost the least important part of it. They might be a good artist, but they don't have to be.
Yeah, it's a selling the image and the everything.
So there's a lot of other factors there, and I love the jazz community and the classical music community and the independent music communities because they are first focused on their music.
The music, the artist, yeah.
And so finding the mentors is tricky because the industry, in terms of the success of people, is always shifting. And I would say there's almost like a gap in Calgary. There's like people my age and older, but there's often a gap between my age and the young emerging artists. There seems to be like almost a 20-year period in there where there are fewer artists than there was when I was growing up. So that's in this scene. So I think you have to be a little bit more proactive now.
Yeah.
And I think you have to be more skeptical about all the things that you're consuming in the ways that we can do it on, whether that's, the internet and YouTube and stuff. I also love it. I love the fact that, hey, you can see some old recordings of these incredible, you can see Miles Davis, but I actually did see Miles Davis live. I did see a lot of these masters in person. And that
experience
performance is more than what you get out of a YouTube version of it.
Definitely.
There's so many things that are lacking when people's only major influence is coming off a screen.
Right.
They have to be in person more. So that maybe that's the thing I haven't really expressed that clearly, is that getting out there to meet and be in live performances and interact with people, that's really critical now to me. I think maybe was taken for granted when I was younger because we did that all the time.
Yeah.
We didn't have all these other distractions.
Exactly. That's why I'm trying to teach my own kids too, to go to live events and bring them out and sit in the audience and the live experience. Definitely different than just.
But that's also economically challenging now.
Yes, true.
Because things are expensive. Traveling, parking, all those tickets.
Yeah.
I was actually explaining that so with JazzYYC, we have a youth ticket.
Oh, yeah.
And we don't ask for your ID.
Yes.
We figure people are going to know where they're at with things. And if financially they can't afford a normal ticket and they're on the fence or whatever, then we're not going to fuss over it too much. But I guess my point is that we're trying to make an easy portal for youth. Right. And I was even emailing a youth this morning saying they were trying to buy tickets to a great concert we have coming up where normally tickets are $70 to $90.
Right.
But they can get a ticket for $20.
Right.
Plus a few fees. And we make a priority for that with JazzYYC.
That's so important that they experience live great artists in person and
Yeah.
live music.
But and hopefully by their mid-20s, like we call it 25 and under, they start to have some economic, independence where they can afford and choose. But it isn't easy. It is expensive.
Yeah, it is.
Things are much more expensive. I used to be able to go to a lot of free things. I had a student tickets to Calgary Philharmonic when I was a university student.
Yeah.
I think there's still something like that, but I mean, I had season tickets
to
the classic series, and I sat way up in the nosebleeds.
Right, same, yeah.
I don't know if people do that as much now, but it's
For sure.
yeah.
Okay. Was there a moment when you seriously questioned about staying in music or quitting some project?
There's moments like that every day. Seriously? Well, I will say the pandemic was challenging.
Right.
I was struggling to find purpose to even play my instrument during that time. So that, I think, was, like I said, existential challenge for all artists and people, and not just artists. I always found it even more challenging because I'm a wind musician, that the wind musicians were kind of weaponized as like you're even more dangerous.
Right.
You're blowing at people with your instrument.
Right.
Okay.
Cover up with whatever socks. Think at the end of the horn.
I don't want to talk about it. It was a horrible period. And however, what I guess maybe what I learned, and maybe isn't exactly on point to your question, but is that whether we're interacting biologically because of, whatever we're breathing, our mood and our energy and the way we talk to people and the way we listen to people and the way we kind of engage in our presence and all that, that affects the conversation. That affects the world. So I realized that my artistic experiences affect me as a person more than I thought. And so in terms of having times where I was not sure I wanted to do this, I don't think I ever felt that I didn't want to be playing music. Do I want to be performing being in the competition of it? Like auditions, I've had to audition for various things. That means you got to really prepare. And in a sense, you're auditioning every time you play in some environments. So being at the standard you want, that part is frustrating. It can be hard. I definitely have periods in my life where I'm doing too much on the business or on my job elements of producing shows where I'm not preparing myself as much. Same thing when I was teaching. I said that before. It's hard to be a good teacher and give all you need to your students and maintain your skills as a player. So I used to keep my horns around me when I was teaching all the time, and I would like play to them and do things. So that helped a bit. But to really intentional practice to maintain that's where it's hard. So definitely I have periods where I struggle, and my wife helps me to kind of put it in perspective, or I kind of readjust my schedule. I can get caught doing things where I just did put in so many meetings. I did not put time for practice, which, by the way, I do. I schedule my practice like a meeting, and I talk to students about that too. And it's not a lot, but I put in periods just like working out. Okay, here's some practice time. And I try to look at my schedule each week and block that in. If I've got a concert coming up, I almost always do more. And I start to almost move between okay, I get a little tired of 10 hours at a computer. So after 2 or 3 hours, I'll go play for 45 minutes or something and go back to the computer. And so I try to juggle that where I work at home. So on the positive side of now remote learning or remote meetings and various other things, but at the same time, I try to go meet people in person and do things in person. So it's not easy, but I wouldn't say I had major. I think what I realized is when I was touring in the 90s and the early 2000s, I had to make a choice about family and about more stability and working more in the city. So I shifted some things. And then I was working doing this club, and I was playing and I was teaching more, but it was all private, and it was all very up and down through the season. And I was doing, camps. And then I switched and taught in a school for 10 years. And then that was like the gig. And now I've stopped that, and I'm working for the society and working in the greater community now. And that's where, each of those stages, I do have these moments where I'm like, oh,
You get hurt, yeah.
how do I come prepared? And I also have performances where I don't feel good.
Right.
And that you don't like that, where you're like, I wasn't as prepared physically. I wasn't as prepared, with the music. and then an instrument's physical, being
Yeah.
kind of on top, being ready. So I don't think I lost faith in being able to do it, but I definitely had periods where like, oh, this is really hard. I didn't, and I'm not enjoying the performance as much as I would had I prepared better.
Right.
So that creates a bit of angst
Right.
around things.
I see. Okay. Let's move on to the time travel segment here. The last
Probably answering
part.
too long
Yeah.
questions. I'm
No, that's
sorry.
okay. Um, if you could sit down with your younger self, like age 20 or something, just before all the touring and directing and all the leadership roles, what advice would you give yourself about choosing opportunities? And what would you tell yourself not to worry about? Two different questions.
Um, Maybe I'll start with the second one first. Like, I think we all tend to worry about what other people think of us
Mm-hmm.
too much
Mm-hmm.
because that's just their projection in that moment. If they have an opinion, oh, this person is this. We like to categorize stuff, and I think we give too much power to that, like worrying about our identity. So I don't think I worried a lot, but I think I had moments where, you know, I changed myself too much. Like if I'm talking to a veteran musician or I'm talking to an audience member or I'm talking to a young player, like maybe my hat changed a bit and I kind of spoke differently. And I think if I was looking back at myself, I would just say it's okay to be yourself all the time, not just to be yourself sometimes. So I don't think that would have changed maybe the trajectory of what I did because I was lucky in the sense that I grew up in a social family environment that was a little unorthodox. Um, I was kind of raised by a group of aunts and uncles and grandparents. Had a unique upbringing in terms of where I was not necessarily my primary, whatever family was not ideal in the sense of it's what's expected or normal. So it's not, so there's a part of me that was kind of anxious about that. Like I was like, oh, well, I didn't have any siblings, although I did find out I had a sibling later.
Okay.
I did find out more about my extended family. And I guess we all have obviously a part of us that wants to know where we come from culturally,
Right.
you know, other things that affect us. And at the same time, where we come from does not need to affect much of who we are. Sometimes I think we get too caught up in our identities. Certainly, identity politics is frustrating to me because I don't think it should matter. Music to me should be available and an opportunity to explore for anybody, regardless of their social, economical, cultural background. Now, you can tap into it like, hey, this kind of music was in my family. Like we had French Canadian music
Right.
in my family, as well as other styles. Because I was very lucky to have a performing artist relative who mentored, and I didn't even realize how many songs I knew. When I got to university, I knew all these songs that people didn't know, but I grew up with them in that culture. And other people do have their own songs too, right? But I found it, if I look back at what I did, I think, and I think that's just a young person thing is that we're morphing ourselves to please the people around us. So I don't know that I did anything wrong. And what I would say differently to myself, maybe the main thing I would say is kind of get your schedule together earlier. However, hanging out late and being social with people connected me and built relationships. And I don't know if that was bad because I have a lot of good friends. I have a nice group of people that I've known for a long time. And we don't always get along on everything and we have different views, but we still know that we're much more than one view or one opinion on things. And there I can hang out with somebody and some of my friends and we can talk about the old days or we can talk about now, or we can sort of lament about how we're getting old, which is kind of what it is often. But I still think I don't feel too many regrets. Because there were some foundational things I maintained. And maybe that's one thing I would say is that pay attention to those relationships. Don't, because there's a few relationships that, went sideways or you didn't get along with, and maybe there's hard feelings. Those really don't matter as you get older. I definitely got into some, I don't want to call them fights, but disputes over stuff where I thought something was really important. And now I'm like, that's not important. Like, think about it. And, it's kind of like one of the things that maybe differentiates people is that you know when a person's a parent, usually. Usually there's some things you can identify as like, okay, there you realize you're not the most important thing. And as an artist, quite often you can be caught being you're the most important thing. And you make your decisions based around that because
You're the big shot.
you don't have somebody else you're totally accountable to all the time. So being a parent, at least at some stage of your life, changes that. So I'm very grateful. I mean, I didn't have my kids early. I took some time. My wife and I took time to develop ourselves and explore things, and we didn't get married till our mid-late 20s, then had children. And it was like, okay, I'm glad I took that time. Some of the people I went to school with and as young people, they got married or had children very young. And I'm like, oof, like, I think that just makes it very hard.
It changes your priorities a lot, and working in the music as an artist is hard to have a
It's
family.
already hard.
It's very hard.
You
Yeah.
have to spend time by yourself. I don't know, like, again, going back in time, I appreciate the history and I appreciate the experiences I had. I like to explore them a little bit with friends. I'm glad of the relationships I have. I think I'd, watch out for the imbalances in your choices and pay attention to the experiences you're having because they're, this, I guess, the preciousness of life, not taking anything for granted.
Right.
I've lost some friends and family, and obviously we all do. And they kind of remind you that, you can't take anything for granted. So I think maybe young people innately won't listen to that message anyway, because the invincibility of that age.
Being young. Yeah.
So I don't know. That I love that joke that, kids these days, as said by Socrates, it's like, we think things are different. They're not. Things are always sort of the same. In terms of
Stages.
there are different things distracting us a bit, and maybe things have accelerated, and certainly the consumption, the amount of things we can get.
The information.
Finding balance in health is hard.
Yeah.
Prioritizing health is important, and I would say maybe I would tell myself a little more to watch out for that.
All right. Don't drink too much.
Stay out too late,
Yeah,
not sleep,
right.
all those things.
Right. Okay. Excellent. So for our closing reflection here, when you look at JazzYYC today, what makes you most proud of?
I think the growth and the resilience of the organization. I think we started, in 2012 in the ashes of previous collapses with a lot of trauma. And that trauma continues. So I'm glad that we've kind of moved past it. Time heals some of those wounds. So I'm proud of that. I think that the pandemic maybe was an interesting correction where we were on such a strong growth curve before the pandemic that it maybe adjusted us a little bit. So, whoa, hold up. You got to pay attention to all things. And we didn't like it at all, but we were able to adapt and, as that hated word, pivot to various kinds of programming things and explore different stuff because we weren't so entrenched in a way to do our season. That was me as a volunteer, by the way. Like, I was on the board. I was on committees. I didn't become staff for JazzYYC until the fall of 2022. And that was sort of a post-pandemic decision. It was like, okay, well, am I gonna push some more chips into the pot here and really try to help more? And not just because it's a job, because it isn't about, it is a job. So I got to meet the expectations of the job. But I had a bigger view of what we could do and our impact on the community.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling like 2025 was a great, realization of many of our goals. We can do it.
I've seen
Now,
growth.
can we do more? And can we make it sustainable? And can we innovate to build audience and to that's the new challenge. So I'm optimistic. I'm also, terrified quite often in terms of the scope of it. We are not just a festival organization. As I mentioned, we have over 45 now youth students registered in our programs, and our relationships with them and their families are complicated and important. So there's a lot of responsibility that is challenging to kind of balance.
Right.
But I like people I work with and the volunteers I work with and the boards community. Like, so I'm happy about the place we are today, and I know what we can. I think I know what we can do.
Yeah, it's exciting too.
Yeah.
Things that you can do.
So those things are all, but you still have to do the work,
Yeah.
and you can't keep your eye off the ball, so to speak.
Yes.
So it's like fragility of it all is also very apparent to me.
Right, right,
It doesn't take much to create problems
right.
and have a change.
Mm, okay. Wow. Okay, I've learned a lot. Thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing your expertise in community building community.
One person's experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you for listening to Making It in Music. And this episode sparked something for you. Share it with someone that wants to build their own musical career. Until next time, and keep listening, keep learning, and making it in music. Thanks. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Louis.
Thanks for listening. This wraps up our season 1 for Making It in Music. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us, as we will have more exciting guests on season 2.